Good afternoon and welcome to Implementing DevOps for NetSuite, the latest webinar from your hosts, Business Solution Partners. My name is Craig Cook. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for BSP, and today I'm joined by the Customer Engineering Manager from our partner Salto, Dan Putman. Dan, as our audience filters into the room today for the live webinar, I'm going to check in with you. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's pretty sunny here in Michigan, still cold, but that's putting a smile on my face.
Excellent, Dan. Well, I've been looking forward to this webinar for quite some time, and today we're going to explore an emerging practice area for IT operations and leadership, this emerging arena of DevOps. Really excited about it. Today, we're going to define DevOps, understand how DevOps aligns with some of the business challenges you may be facing, and then jump into some practical knowledge that everyone can leverage to get started with DevOps today, including an examination of some NetSuite native tools you can try out right now. Then we're going to shift gears and look at a professional approach to DevOps at scale with the introduction of the leading fully integrated NetSuite DevOps solution, Salto. And we're going to take you behind the curtain to see how it works. I'll tell you now, these next 40 minutes are going to be extremely valuable to you and your organization. So, part of what we all love about NetSuite is the fact that it's infinitely customizable. I've seen my team execute some amazing development projects to ensure that our customers have the tools they require for their unique business processes. But every iteration of your NetSuite deployment, it increases complexity and it amps up the need for effective collaboration and communication with both third-party developers and providers and your team of end users. Ensuring reliable features, scalable enhancements, and rapid debugging is key, especially in heavily regulated industries with security and compliance protocols. So yeah, all this and a bunch more, this is all the domain of DevOps. All right, I think it's time to officially get started and introduce today's presenter. Dan Putman is Salto's Customer Engineering Manager and has been with the organization for a little over a year. Dan is truly a rock star in the SaaS ecosystem, having worked on complex problems from a programmatic perspective for companies both big and small in a wide variety of verticals. He marries software development proficiency with a keen perspective around product design, strategic planning, and growth. And his guiding philosophy is that great technology and talented teams are wasted if not properly matched to the business need. Dan's work with Salto is helping to realize his vision of streamlined go-to-market processes for ID departments everywhere. And I don't think we could have a better guide for our introduction to DevOps for NetSuite. So Dan, I'm going to pass screen control over to you, and I'll see you on the other side for some Q&A.
So, like Craig said, Dan Putman, engineer by trade and heart. So coming in and marrying up the idea of business applications mixed with DevOps so that people can do low code, no code customizations in these kinds of platforms, but still get a ton of power and value out of it at a rapid pace is key for me. I think it's the next frontier, really, as we get away from needing to be an expert engineer, software developer in order to be really impactful in a business. So with that said, let's see what we can do for NetSuite. We're going to do a little background on what DevOps is. So DevOps, the history of it, as you can imagine, developers been doing their job for a number of years, but it was really siloed. The idea of building infrastructure was given to the IT team. Testing was done by a quality team. And then you start to add in, all these virtualization platforms, all these different release management tools. But it got really fragmented and siloed, slowed the team down. The idea of DevOps is to create, as you can see here in the picture, this kind of continuous cycle where there's a team that is able to manage these pieces independently. They understand their work stream all the way from conception and testing all the way up to actual deployment and value creation at the top end. So this process has been going on in software for a good couple of decades, is really this transformation. And it's just starting really in the platform space, the biz app space here in the last, I'd say about 5 years. And we're starting to pull from the DevOps software space, pulling these best practices, and that's what we're going to talk about. So where the as code concept, you may have heard of, the idea here is that we can take these customizations, these definitions, for software, it was infrastructure and code and applications. For biz apps, it's usually configurations and custom scripts and the setup. of these applications, like in NetSuite preferences, we can take those, pull them out, and standardize them as a flat file, as code, as configs that we can version and redeploy as needed. Obviously, there's a ton of benefits here. You can start to take a process that's fragmented, that's slow, that you need to remember each time, really put some standardization around it, start to speed that up, have confidence in your deployment strategy that it's going to work when the app says it's going to work. And just we're getting that value up to production, up to, where the end users can make use of it faster. Again, actually kind of rehammering that nail, but we'll put it there. Standardized change management, dependency analysis, reliable deployments, documentation, versioning, auditing. For a lot of people that are working in NetSuite, you're going to have people auditing you for compliance later on. These things are always painful, right? They take time, they're error prone. With what we're bringing to the table from the DevOps practice, we're trying to make these easier, more standard, so you're hitting fewer roadblocks. All right. So one of the key things about a process is that you really need to be able to have this process work across your business. So if you're using more than one platform, right? Not just NetSuite, you're using Salesforce, Zendesk, Jira. These are things that Salto does, but a lot of companies are going to have these additional tools in place, these additional apps. You really want to be able to do the same process across all these, right? And not have to context switch when you're trying to say update NetSuite and then go update a relevant field in Salesforce. You want to be able to do it all at once, know exactly what you're doing, know the process is going to be the same. So we're always going to shoot for that when we're talking about the process today. Even when I'm talking about the NetSuite native tools, the goal a lot of times when we're talking about those things is to relate it back to the process in other tools and in systems. Okay, so how can we get you guys started? So the foundation here, you could today go get your suite scripts that you're creating. If you're a developer, you can manage those in Git, be versioning them. You're going to see that later when we're talking about SDF. You're going to see you could deploy those via SDF to your sandboxes. Sandboxes are critical when we're talking about DevOps. You can't really do DevOps with a single environment. So utilization of your sandboxes, even if it's just one sandbox to a production environment, or a stack of sandboxes, like a development, a test, and then a production environment, are going to be key to start setting that up so you have some reliability in your testing frameworks and testing process. And then we're going to talk about copy to account and SDF today as things you can do before we get to Salto. Suite Bundler, some of you may be familiar with. Obviously, that's getting deprecated, so we're not going to talk about that today, but it technically is still available to those of you that would want to bundle in order to move things up between environments. So the constant crawl, walk, run, and if anyone grows wings, you might be flying by the end. You can see we'll get to full automation, which is the holy grail of DevOps. But today, with a Salto, with the native tools, looking at dependency analysis, so looking at your changes and the impact of your changes before you make them is key. So the faster you can do that, the more confidence you can have in those changes prior to deployment. There's going to be additional tools down this road here from left to right that are going to increase that confidence and make it easy to deploy. But first, it's got to start with that solid foundation of, am I making the right change? And I'm sure I'm not going to affect my other business processes, be it like affecting a workflow when I change the safe search underneath, things like that. So after that, you're starting to walk. We're getting into the ability to clean up your tech debt. So do I know what I'm not, what's in these systems? I'm like, wait, that shouldn't be there. That's old cruft. Can I clean that up and have confidence that it won't break anything? Do I have version control? Okay, am I actually saving my configs in case I need to do a revert? And so I have a record for my audit. And then do I have a process, even if it's not automatic, even if it's not a push button deploy, do I have a standard process for pushing these changes between environments? Okay. Once we've got that, got the next layer of the foundation, I can start to push changes from a sandbox to a test to a production environment. So I have a very clean test environment. to go to before production. So am I implementing separation of duties? Do my devs do the work and then it's reviewed by admins that are the only people that have access to my upper environments, things like that. The ability to bring back data, or not data, but metadata and configs from my production environment. Let's say you did a hot fix, or you have legacy configs that are out in your production environment. Can you get those back into your test and sandbox environments so that you can get a better, more reliable test and be sure of your changes? And then, of course, being able to monitor changes. Are things changing in my production environment that I wasn't aware of? Did someone change a workflow they should not be touching? Things like that can really help us to avoid those headaches down the line and days potentially of debugging and figuring out why something broke. And then we're not going to touch on it today and demonstrate it, but full automation, so the ability to actually use Git to take changes and change sets, merge them, and once we approve them, have them automatically deploy up through our test environments, run some automated tests, and then go to production, is really the holy grail. That's where dev teams are always shooting to get to for software, and the same is true of biz apps. If you can implement a change and then just never have to do it again and trust that it's going to work when it rolls up to production automatically, you're officially winning. So let's talk a little bit about the NetSuite native tools first. So these are great first steps into the process. I'm sure the people on this call have probably touched something here before. I hope you have. So copy to account, start with that. It covers a lot of customization types. You don't need an IDE, which is great for a lot of admins that aren't coming from a technical background. And it's pretty easy to use and enable once you get it switched on. But the problem here is that it doesn't cover everything, obviously. As I said most before, you can only do one customization at a time. This is a pretty big limitation when you're talking about doing deployments. Oftentimes we not only want to deploy, say, a workflow and its dependencies, we might want to deploy multiple workflows or several adjacent pieces of configuration that are important to work together, even if they're not strict dependencies. The same thing for those complex customizations. When I get into something that's got multiple dependencies and kind of a more complicated web of relationships, it tends to fail. You may have run into this if you tried to push the limits of copy to account. And then debugging, it is not as easy as it is to start with copy to account. It is not easy to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it when it does go wrong. And we're going to see that here in a second with its basis on SDF. So speaking of SDF, this is good. It covers more customization types, right? So you may have heard of this. It's much more flexible. It allows you to do multiple objects at a time. So if I wanted to push those multiple workflows, I can build a deployment that'll push all of that at once and hit the proper endpoints. However, if you haven't seen it, you're going to see it here in a minute. It does require developer experience, or at least a very technical mind and an ability to put up with some hurdles as you figure it out. Again, it doesn't cover all customization types. There are some limits to SDF, both in the customization types and the types of customizations you can make. So even, say, deploying a workflow, you can't delete after the fact. So if you're trying to do rollbacks, if you're trying to remove certain portions of your customizations, you can't do that with SDF. So some things we can improve upon here. So in general, this is the Salto model, but it really is what we're looking to do, again, as a DevOps platform. When we're looking for the goals, we're looking to really promote changes in as few clicks as possible, right? We want to enable going between any of these environments, be it sandbox to production, production to sandbox, to get better alignment. We want to make sure that when we're done with our changes, when someone comes in to review our work, be it a manager or an auditor, we want to have clear visibility into what's going on in these environments, who did it and when. And then on top of that, if you have any issues, any troubleshooting that you need to do, you want to be able to figure out the problems quickly, right? Time spent troubleshooting, figuring out error, systems down, it's time and money lost. Lastly, the planning portion, like I was talking about that, you got to always start with a base plan. You need to know where everything is, make sure you know how it's used and what the impact is going to be when you change. Otherwise, everything's chaos even further down the line in the process. All right. So given all that, what is Salto going to do for us when we get to it? So those things I talked about, it's we say universal DevOps solution. It's a very open platform. As you can see, developers, admins, architects can all come in, work in Salto, and then deploy their combined changes out to a NetSuite or some of these other platforms. You may also be using Zendesk, Workato, Salesforce, things like that. But in a nutshell, we're looking to solve those key use cases I was talking about earlier and really build on top of the foundations that NetSuite has laid. We use the SDF platform, and then we layer on suite app customizations on top of that to fill in some of those gaps, and really trying to bring the best of both worlds, development power, as well as a streamlined IDE that allows you to not be technical, but still get some really powerful things done. Let's go ahead and let me talk to you about copy to account, SDF, and then I'll show you what Salto can do. Copy to account, pretty straightforward. If you haven't already enabled it, if you want to get started with it, you can do that by going in, enabling it in your settings for your account. It'll need to be enabled on both your source account and your target account. And then once you do, you're going to see a button, copy to account. When we click that, it's going to take us to the next step, which is where we're going to look at that object. We're going to give it an audit trail name. We're going to get the process going. And when I go from here, we are going to show the dependencies. So the copy to account does look at the direct dependencies of this single customization. Like I said, I can't grab additional ones. I'm limited to this workflow, or I'm limited to this, this field, whatever I want to deploy, this custom record. So it's just going to show me that direct tree downwards. So I make sure I'm bringing that stuff. You'll also notice that I'm not able to customize from here and say, I want to bring these portions of these dependencies. It doesn't tell you what's changed on each of these items, just that this object is needed. Okay. So from there, this is where we get into, you can kind of see the underpinnings of SDF. It's going to do a validation. It's going to tell us what's going on in this validation. So it's pretty clear, but this, it kind of starts to look a little bit like a terminal. Might not be perfectly clear what's going on here. That's fine though. It's going to give us an idea of whether it's going to be successful. In this case, we are in this deployment, which is great. And then when I click deploy, it finishes that deployment, so the validation had passed. It tells you exactly what's coming out, and I can go check my account, check my audit log, see that it's been done, and that the customization is showing up now in that target account. So great for what it does. However, as soon as you start to get a little complex, it can fall over, which is where you probably need to start leveling up to something like SDF. So let me hop into that. So SDF, again, powerful, but you might have noticed we switched a little bit here. We switched over to an IDE and a command line terminal down here. So I've got all my files here. I've actually fetched these out of the SDF API. And the first thing you do is you create a deployment XML to define what you want to deploy. So I can do multiple things here. I'm just going to do one workflow for this deployment, but I can put multiples in here if I wanted to. And then from there, the first thing I need to do is do dependencies. So you'll see add dependency references to the manifest. Once we select that, then it'll go ahead, it'll update my deployment manifest here. You'll see I've got SFA, workflow, opportunities. These are all required to deploy that workflow. And then from there, I need to do a validate. So you'll see the validate project piece of this integration, or this IDE plugin. I can do that. It'll start to validate, and you'll notice that the validation down here in my terminal, again, not super clear what's going on if you're not technical, if you're not a developer, but you can see the validation failed, and we actually need to have a save search here, as you probably saw in the previous page with the copy to account. My add dependencies didn't catch that. We don't catch that until we do the validation. So that can be a little confusing for non-technical people. So we'll have to add that in manually. We'll grab that ID, we'll pop it in here. So now we're showing what objects we're dependent upon. Okay, that's great. We revalidate. It'll say, yep, now we're good to go. The validation has completed now that we have all of our appropriate elements. And then I can request the deployment from there. So once I tell the IDE I'd like to deploy, make sure I've got my, I need to properly validate with tokens and whatnot. Another portion of working in the IDE that you'll need to navigate. It'll show us the installation is complete. You're getting the same kind of feedback as your copy to account. So you see that here, and now it's out. The workflow is out there. The search is out there. I can go see it, but I had to go through a little pain to get there, as you can tell. So if you're a developer, this can work well. Still has its limitations. I didn't mention it earlier, but the copy to account functionality doesn't let me push anything from the file cabinet. When I'm here in my IDE and using SDF, I can start to do some of that work, but it's equally difficult to start pushing suite scripts and things like that if I wanted to do it here. So we can do a little better for a couple of perspectives. So let me show that off right now with Salto and what we're trying to do. This is Salto, okay? And I've got a demo 1 and a demo 2 environment that I've connected up to Salto. Keep in mind that as I'm going through this, I'm going to stay in Salto, but all of my customizations that I've been building within NetSuite. So I'm going to show a workflow. I built that within NetSuite. Same with the Safe Search underpinning it. Salto really is about managing, creating visibility and going through that promotion process, the DevOps process, but it doesn't take away the NetSuite UI that you're used to using. You probably, are very familiar with. So let me go ahead and show the change. We're looking at change planning, so impact analysis. I've got a workflow that I like to use here, a slightly different workflow, DP demo 1. You can see here that I've got this elements view showing me everything that's going on with this workflow. I've got my states, my actions. I can see what my condition is here in the safe search for this action. And then the most importantly, what I like to show here is that we will take all of these relationships and place them right here at the bottom. So if I want to look at the dependencies for this workflow, I can see them at a glance. Maybe I want to change the safe search to change that action condition, right? I can click on that safe search, hop right to it, and start to understand, okay, I see you've got my filters here, billing country, currency, great. And I think, okay, I really want to change, I want to remove currency. Wait, what's that going to affect? Is that only going to affect my workflow or is it going to affect someone else? Well, that could be difficult to figure out, but Salto, I literally just scroll down and we'll show you not only what the safe search depends on, but also what depends on it, what depends on the safe search. And I can see here I have my DP custom workflow that's also depending on it, not just my demo 1 workflow. And if I click on that, it'll take me right to where it's used and I can understand, oh, I've got another workflow action that's using this search as a condition, right? Condition safe search. So I'm instantly starting to get a better idea of what's going on. And as you can imagine, if you've got a complex environment with 10, 100 kind of dependencies and usages, this is very, very powerful for giving you that picture. So let's say I'm good, all right? I've looked through this, I've made my changes, I want to deploy this workflow up. What Salto can do is I can create a deployment. So I'm gonna go from demo 1, my source, to demo 2. Okay, it's gonna be very similar to what you're seeing in the copy to account at this stage, right? Picking my target, picking my source, but things are gonna get a little more powerful and different here at the next page. So what you get here is the first thing Salto does is it takes the configs for demo 1 and demo 2, it cuts out all the noise and only shows you the changes, so the differences between these two environments. And I've got everything at my fingertips here. So you see if I pop open workflows, I get an idea of what's different between these two environments. So again, visibility, so I'm making the right change, pushing the right thing up, keeping my environments as aligned as possible. And I can see that I've got things that are in demo 1, but not in demo 2. So it'll show up as additions. That's what would happen if I promoted it. things that are in demo 2, but not in demo 1. So that means I need to remove it from demo 2 in order to align in this direction, right? And I will mention that Salto, using our Suite app, can delete a lot of types like custom records, fields, what have you, something that SDF can't do. So we can automate some of those deletions as part of alignments. And then lastly, I've got things that are in both environments, but have been modified. So in this case, it's a workflow, the email test, that has a workflow action that we have added. So I can drill down and see exactly what this change is here in green. And I know that this is the only change that occurred on this workflow. I can push that up if I wanted to. So again, visibility, really key, takes that information we get out of SDF and lets us better plan these deployments. So I know what I want to deploy, this DP demo 1. I could also have filtered down here. Again, further cut out the noise, increase my, or decrease the noise in my vision of making deployments. So I've got DP demo 1. You'll notice that the dependencies tab is updated. And we show not only the direct dependencies like the search that I need. We're saying it's not in demo 2, so it's got to go. If it were in demo 2, we wouldn't show it because it'd just be there. You wouldn't need to worry about it because it was the same. So Salto will give you that confidence. And then the to be reviewed and incoming references are additional dependencies that aren't required, but we elevate to the admin so they can understand, make the right deployment with the right attributes. So in this case, the custom field is already in demo 2, but I've changed some things. So I get to decide if I want to bring any of these attributes along with me. I won't do it for this deployment, but I could. And the same thing for incoming references, my DP custom workflow has been flagged because I selected the safe search that it refers to. So we say, we don't know if Salto doesn't know if you want to deploy it, but we'll still show it to you just in case you intended to deploy both these workflows at the same time. We make it nice and easy for you to select it. So I've got an idea of what I want to send. I've got my DP demo 1 workflow. I've got my safe search. So let's ask Salto to lock this deployment, do a review of the changes to make sure nothing's going wrong. And I've got all my dependencies, that there's no, say, account specific values I need to enter prior to deployment or anything like that. So let this deployment plan go through. And then in this next page, if I had any issues, we'd elevate that up with a nice error message. So not just the SDF error message, but also some additional context that our engineers have put in to make it clear what went wrong, what you need to do to fix it. I am green, so I feel pretty good about sending this over and it's going to work. And this deployment, we do respect the permissions that you set up in NetSuite. So if someone's not an admin in the target environment, they wouldn't be able to deploy. So you can have developers doing work, getting things ready, but only the admin would be able to actually push those changes. So let's go ahead. I will deploy. There's a little extra protection because I am going to my quote unquote production environment, my demo production environment. Now you notice I haven't had to touch a terminal. I haven't had to customize any deployment XMLs or anything. Salto's taking care of that all in the background, as well as hitting the proper endpoints. You can see we're telling you what we're doing here. We're deploying now. Now, in the background, if you want to dig in as a developer, there are additional customizations. We don't keep that from the power users, but we also are really trying to get that streamlined approach so it's easy for anyone to get the power of DevOps. You see, I'm already done. So I've actually already deployed that workflow and search into my NetSuite environment. I'll always have this record here for auditability. So I've got it in Salto. I can version my changes as well. So you might have heard of Git, as I was mentioning earlier, incredibly powerful tool for versioning configs, but it's again, really developer centric. Salto takes care of all that. I've already actually taken this, I pre-loaded the configs that need to be saved. I've got a nice little message telling me what I moved between which environments and who did it. And then lastly, I always like to show this. I use Jira for my tickets. Like you can imagine a change request in Jira or ServiceNow, things like that. I can actually take those ticket IDs, I can pop them right next to my deployment record so that when I save this over to Git, it's actually going to give me the record of the work I did. So that message and all those files right on my ticket. So you'll see I now have 10 commits. And less than a minute ago, I pushed these files. And if I needed to, I could go look at them in my Git repository. So not required. It's good for developers. Admins can stay right here, or managers can stay right here in Jira. And I've always got the record in Salto as well. So that is Salto DevOps in a nutshell. I won't belabor anything else. Got thrown a lot at you today, but I will mention that the idea of pipelines and automation is getting rolled out here soon. We can do some additional power use cases in the workspaces of doing find and replace, things like that. And we can also do monitoring of changes. So if you wanted to, say, watch a certain subset of changes or a certain subset of configs, like in a production environment, we could do that and then notify you when those changes happen, let you know what happened, in what environment, and who did it.
All right. Well, thanks, Dan. That was really excellent. I have a couple of questions myself, and I might even hijack this Q&A session a little bit. But we did get a question from John. John Sharp asked, when will the automation deployment pipeline feature be available? He was asking this back on, I think it was slide 5 or 6, where we were talking about automating into GitHub and automating the process. So I guess you wanted a little bit more clarity into that.
Yeah, happy to, John. So automation, we actually have something in place today that's very, again, very developer centric as we were doing testing. The main deployment of the feature, which is going to give you those nice workflows, so you don't need to be a tech pro able to do Git and terminal and all that, should be rolling out within about a month. I don't have a firm date. The way we operate with our roadmap is we bring things as quickly as possible, but it also means we need to be flexible sometimes to get it right. So working off about a month or so is what I've been telling people right now.
Excellent. All right, so I think a lot of our audience today was probably more on the technical side of the equation. And if they want to, adopt this software, they're going to have to make the case, right? Can you talk a little bit about maybe what are the benefits of Salto beyond the development team? Like, how does leadership benefit from Salto? How do our end users benefit from Salto, right?
Yeah. So I usually group this into like 3 different categories that people, the higher ups are going to care about. Typically, especially in the finance space, if you're in that side of NetSuite, it's going to be the auditability, tracking your changes. And so you're not going back and looking at system logs to try and tell, okay, who did what when. It's really tracking those changes as you go and then validating, yep, we didn't have any out of band changes. And here's a record of all the stuff and all the configs that we update over the last, month, 3 months, or year. That almost always is a win, saves time, you have higher confidence. Then you get into, we can talk about efficiency and delivery of value faster. That's always going to be fuzzy. It's going to depend on your current processes and all those things. But again, as soon as we talk about value delivery, that usually perks ears up. That's going to be the big benefit. And then one that's near and dear to my heart as a software developer is the reduction in errors and outages. Manual changes are just like, errors are moths to a flame when it comes to manual processes, right? If I'm having to take things, oh, that didn't quite work, I can't push it with copy to account or whatever, I'm just going to go to it live in production, and then you're just asking for hurt. So the fewer outages you have, the fewer errors you have, is key, right? What's a day of business outage or a day of missed orders? What's that cost you as a business? So
yeah, absolutely. Within this context, do you work with any automated testing tools?
Yeah, I saw that one. So one of the great things about Salto and what our philosophy is we're an open platform. So when we roll out our pipeline framework, you're going to be able to pick your CI/CD platform that we're going to integrate to. We're going to take care of the orchestration of the deployments. We're going to take care of the visibility and comparison between environments. But if you want to do testing, we can do that within any, say, a GitHub Actions or Circle CI or whatever you want. We can do it there. And any tool you want to bring to the table, as long as they can push results and say yes or no, then we'll also be able to say, okay, test failed or test passed. we'll react accordingly.
And Chiel is asking, so Salto can just deploy the NetSuite elements, including custom-made scripts, no extra tools, no manual actions are needed. You're committing in Salto, and it's writing to NetSuite doing the work, right?
Yep, absolutely. So, I'll be totally upfront and honest. We still have gaps because of the limits of the API and certain things about NetSuite. Those are things we're trying to overcome with our Suite app. And I don't want to bash NetSuite. NetSuite's a great tool, but it is, we're trying to bridge those gaps they just haven't gotten to yet.
Sure.
So this is where one of those is safe searches. Safe searches, when you look at that definition, they're encrypted, right? We can't change them on the fly. However, Salto deploys them as is and gives you visibility into what's inside that safe search. Super handy. You couldn't delete certain elements. We've added that. We've also, like currency subsidiary, things like that, you couldn't deploy before. We can deploy with Salto. And as you were saying, scripts, we handle, so far as I've seen, all scripts, user event scripts, your CSV imports, your advanced PDF templates. We can do all those.
Awesome. Since you're a pretty technical resource in the Salto world, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the roadmap. Like you've given us a little preview here and there, but what is the future of kind of DevOps and for Salto specifically? Like, what are you guys working on?
Yeah, so the big one that we've been busting tail on for the past, really 3-4 months, almost full quarter, is pipeline functionality. And the fun thing, the fun and painful thing with that is we're really trying to get it right for non-technical folk, right? Lowering the ceiling or lowering the floor for access to pipelines. So you don't have to be a Git expert. You can just say, I want these elements. Great, put that up in the pipeline. And that's proven difficult, but we're getting there. That's why we think we're going to have it here quickly. So that's going to be fun. Specifically for NetSuite, one thing I'm really excited about is our ability to do account-specific values in the future. So we're working on that. Today, if you want to deploy between these environments and there's an account-specific value, you've got to go fetch that yourself. You got to pop it into the script, whether it's SDF or Salto, and then hope that it works. Whereas we're looking at some additional API calls and some wizardry. We'll be able to go to that target environment, fetch the relevant account-specific values, and let you determine, like give you a list of what you'd like to put in there. That's going to save people a lot of headaches, especially if you make heavy use of those values.
Yeah, I'm personally not a developer. I do work with code. I work with workflows a lot though, right? And I've got 400 plus dependent workflows in HubSpot. So I'm waiting for you guys to release your HubSpot integration with bated breath.
This is being recorded. Product team, you heard that. Let's get on it.
Excellent. All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions from the audience. I think today was really enlightening, a really excellent webinar. I'm happy to give everybody 15 minutes back in the day. Let me just throw up one last slide here, a little information about BSP. Actually, this is an old slide. We just moved our global headquarters, but everything else on this slide is correct information. Please feel free to reach out to us, whether it's NetSuite needs, whether it's DevOps needs, Salto. We're really happy to be partners with Salto. I think they've got a really phenomenal solution. For us, it's really nice that it's not a NetSuite solution that's still finance focused, AP and AR, right? It's a little outside of the box. We get to talk to a bigger audience. We love talking to operations and IT. We want to offer more solutions to you in the future. So come on out to our future webinars. Check out our YouTube page. We've got just a host of content up there for NetSuite users to get educated, be self-service. This video is going to go up there. There's going to be follow-up from us on this video from all the audience members. We're going to send you a copy of the presentation decks. We're going to send you a copy of the recording so you can refer back to this. If anybody needs any support around DevOps, please feel free to reach out to Dan or myself. We are happy to take your questions and calls. And that's going to do it for us today. So for everybody in our audience who made it through the whole presentation, which was the significant majority of you, we really thank you for hanging out with us today, doing some NetSuite continuing education, learning about DevOps, and if you're ready to professionalize your approach to DevOps, talk to us about Salto. All right, Dan, thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
Of course. Thank you.